The Battle of Britain was one of the most critical battles of the war. It was fought between July 10th through October 31st, 1940. Hitler planned to invade the British Isles. This operation was given the name Operation Sea Lion, but before he did so, he wanted to soften Britain up. To do that, he used his air force, called the Luftwaffe. I think I said that right, but perhaps not, led by Hermann Goring, who was one of Hitler's inner circle, and they were sent to destroy the Royal Air Force. The Royal Air Force was Britain's air force. Today, the German Air Force is also called the Luftwaffe, but it is not the same organization as we're talking about at this time. It's just a generic label. The British Air Force is still known as the Royal Air Force. What this was day after day, night after night, German bombers were launched against Britain, against military targets, and eventually against civilians. If you're going to invade Britain, you need to carry large numbers of troops across the English Channel. Large numbers of troops crammed in boats are vulnerable to air attack. So it was imperative that he destroy the Royal Air Force before he sent troops across. This was the goal of the Battle of Britain. During this time, Winston Churchill emerged as an inspirational war leader of Britain. Winston Churchill is a fascinating character, a wonderful orator. He gave some great speeches. If you are interested in public speaking of any kind, look up Winston Churchill. Read and listen to some of his speeches. Truly amazing. After almost defeating the RAF, Royal Air Force, Hitler ordered the bombing of London, of civilian London. This was a fatal error. This not only stiffened the resolve of the British public, but it gave the RAF time to recover and ultimately defeat the Luftwaffe. The price was just too heavy to continue the bombing raids against Britain. Hitler was forced to call off the invasion of Britain. Britain was aided by a new radar system. Radar was a very new technology at this time, and Britain deployed a system and used it very effectively. We will see a little bit more about that in a moment. The significance of this is that Hitler had to guard against a future two-front war. D-Day launched from Britain and also the Eastern Front conflict with the Soviet Union. If he had succeeded in conquering Britain, there would have been no convenient staging place for the ultimate Allied invasion of Europe. You've seen Saving Private Ryan, perhaps, other World War II movies. Hopefully you're familiar with D-Day. This is when hundreds of thousands of Allied troops were launched from Britain across the English Channel, not very far, and hit the beaches of France at Normandy. If an invasion had tried to be launched from somewhere farther away, it would have been much, much more difficult. Hitler's failure here left him open to invasion from his western quarter, the Western Front. The Battle of Britain is important. It's a time of great heroism on the part of the Royal Air Force. They were significantly outnumbered by the Luftwaffe, but they just simply outfought them. After the battle, Churchill gave a very famous speech in which he said, "Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few." And here he was referring to the British public owing the RAF a debt for putting off the invasion of England, for protecting them from the planned invasion of England. It was this very small yet heroic group of pilots who basically saved Britain. Britain was alone at this time. This is before the United States entered the war. Here we can see a Royal Air Force airfield and the fighters lined up, the pilots having been scrambled, running to their planes, getting ready to take off and defend Britain from the incoming German bombers. Remember, Britain had a radar system that gave it advanced warning of incoming German raids. When a raid was detected, RAF planes at the nearest air bases would be scrambled and they would fly up and try to fight off the German bombers. And this went on all the time. Raids were very frequent, sometimes several times a day, for about 3 months. Here's a map of Britain, and this is France, occupied by Germany at the time, Belgium, the North Sea, during the time of the Battle of Britain. This is a complex map. Don't worry about most of it. This is not going to be on an exam. It's here just so I can point out a few things to you. The first thing I want to point out is if you see up here, this symbol means towns bombed. If it's not clear, the words aren't clear, that's okay, but it means towns bombed. London, of course, is the most obvious target, and it took quite a pounding. But as you can see, it was certainly not the only town or city bombed during the campaign. Even up into Ireland and far north into Scotland, German raids reached that deep. The yellow diamonds, high-level radar systems. So this would be radar towers along the coast. This would give advanced warning to the RAF of incoming German raids. Of course, when the Germans figured out what these were, they became targets of raids themselves. Here's a New York Times front page during the Battle of Britain. It's a little bit too fuzzy for me to determine the exact date, but it did take place during the Battle of Britain. You can see the headline, 600 Nazi planes raid London area again. That should give you some idea of the scale of these attacks. 140 downed. So out of those 600 planes, 140 of them were destroyed. RAF attacks Channel bases. And here again you can see British raid Germans along coast 3 times in 24 hours. The RAF did cross the English Channel and attack German air bases along the coast, but mostly the Battle of Britain was defensive on the part of the RAF.